A visit to Beijing by a delegation of politicians from Taiwan's main opposition party, the Kuomintang, the KMT for short, has been closely watched and controversial. Controversial because China has sent almost 2,000 fighter jets into Taiwan's air defense identification zone over the past 12 months. So the KMT's overtures come at a time that, to Taiwan's government in power, the Democratic Progressive Party seems badly timed. But the KMT says engagement is necessary, especially when the fact is that so much business is done between the two sides. In the meetings, however, a top Beijing official's comments about politics, not business, grabbed the headlines. China warned the KMT that it needs to oppose Taiwan independence. Joining us is Marcin Jejewski, head of the Taiwan office at the European Value Center for Security Policy. Thanks for coming on to the program. Marcin, the KMT's visit is raising eyebrows, but they recently performed very well in elections. So can you first talk about that and why the party performed well?
First of all, thank you so much for having me on today. And yes, indeed, the KMT visit to China is raising a lot of eyebrows, also considering the broader geopolitical context and a further deepening of rifts in the relations between the United States and China, as we have seen, for example, during the Balloon Gate. However, since you mentioned the recent electoral success of the KMT, something that we really have to bear in mind is that in the context of Taiwanese politics, local elections tend to be very local. Voters return to the places where they hold their household registration to deliberate on issues such as traffic safety or subsidies for local welfare programs. The local elections are not a referendum on the geopolitical future of Taiwan. They are not a referendum on the future direction of developments over the Taiwan Strait. So as we leaned closer to the upcoming 2024 presidential and legislative elections, I would be very cautious not to extrapolate too much from the recent performance of the KMT in local elections. Of course, for example, the decision of President Tsai Ing-wen to resign from the function of the chairperson of the Democratic Progressive Party is a sign that the DPP needs to regroup after a less than satisfactory performance in the local contests. But that shouldn't be viewed as a prescient result for what's about to happen in 2024.
Got it. And so right after these elections, which the KMT did do well, as you explained, which is a big blow to President Tsai's party, they head up to Beijing. So how is this being received by the Taiwanese public?
The opinions are definitely mixed. This visit is not taking place in a vacuum. Rather, we should view it in light of the changes in, so to say, core political attitudes of the Taiwanese electorate. And as a matter of fact, the push of the Kuomintang to pursue closer ties with China is not consistent with what we see in annual longitudinal opinion research. So, for example, as of 2022, over 60% of respondents in representative studies identify exclusively as Taiwanese. Over the 30 years that we have data for, that figure has increased by over 50 percentage points. So Taiwanese identity is increasingly independent in the sense of being distinct from the Chinese identity, and people in Taiwan are increasingly assertive about assuring their right to have this identity. This means that there are some qualms about the underutilized potential of this visit, because the Mainland Affairs Council, the main executive body in charge of cross-strait relations in the context of the Taiwanese executive, has called on the Kuomintang to use this visit as a way to convey the will of Taiwanese people to maintain their democratic way of life. However, that didn't seem to be high up on the agenda, which instead focused primarily on economic relations, the well-being of over 1 million Taiwanese business people in China, and efforts to restore more vibrant trade relations between both sides.
Beijing basically picked the party it wants to see run Taiwan with this visit, and is suggesting there be better relations, less aggression with the KMT in power. So despite the fact that citizens tend to focus on the bread and butter local issues and care less about foreign policy, how might all of this impact Taiwan's presidential elections next year, this visit particularly, and things that might happen beyond?
Despite the electoral success of the Kuomintang in the recent local electoral contest, the party is very much amid a major soul-searching exercise. So once again, despite their very successful performance in local elections, the overall support or party identification of Taiwanese electorate with the Kuomintang is on decline. If we look at the data year on year between 2021 and 2022, the identification with the Kuomintang has gone down by as much as 3 percentage points from 17 to 14 last year. Meanwhile, the quickest growing body of voters in Taiwan are those who identify as political independents. I think that this is a trend that we have to monitor very closely. Also, as new players emerge on the Taiwanese political scene. For example, the Taiwan People's Party of the former mayor of Taipei City, KMT, who is very likely to issue a presidential bid himself. His party is also traditionally aligned with the Pen Blue camp, so right. The political bloc surrounding the Kuomintang. And I believe that especially if the KMT were to nominate a more moderate candidate for the presidential elections in 2024, we might see a split in the blue vote in Taiwan.
That'll be very interesting to watch. Now, so we've talked about the island remaining pretty divided when it comes to the kind of relationship it has with Beijing, with some pretty strong feelings from those opposed to better relations with China, people who feel Taiwan is a democracy and not like China with its authoritarian system. Marcin, I want to share with viewers a story from our Taipei reporter, Cha Chun-ye, about a young Taiwanese man who went to Ukraine to join the fight. Take a look.
The man who recorded these is Tony Liu. He crossed the wall from Taiwan to fight for Ukraine.
The shells were flying around me. Once, a bomb fell in front of my trench. I was lucky it didn't explode. I couldn't believe it.
He went to Ukraine soon after the war started to help refugees. But he saw things that made him want to fight.
This was early in the war. They said it was only a special military operation, but they also bombed people's houses. This is Domino's Pizza, look. So I joined the battle.
He says just as he played his part in helping Ukraine, so can Taiwan, despite China's efforts to isolate the island diplomatically. He's proud of being a Taiwanese volunteer soldier.
My name is Lu, come to Taiwan. Come here, help Ukraine people. Yeah. Slava Ukraine.
Liu is home now. After 3 months in Ukraine, he had spent most of his money. He now has a job at a supermarket and is happy to have got home alive. Liu knew another man who flew thousands of kilometers to fight in Ukraine, but didn't come home. Zheng Shengguang is the first and so far the only Taiwanese to die fighting for Ukraine.
A Taiwanese sacrificed his life for the freedom of another country. For me, he's a hero.
Many other men who wrote their names on this flag have also died. Liu says the entire experience makes it difficult for him to sleep. But he said Taiwan should treat the Ukraine war as a wake-up call.
The Ukrainian people are very united. But when I look at Taiwan, why are we so divided in the face of China's possible invasion? We never said we want to attack others. It's they who want to attack us. Why are we not united?
Liu has loaned his war gear to an airsoft gun training facility, which he visits to talk about his time in Ukraine. he hopes to inspire other Taiwanese people to take civil defense seriously and be ready for if China does attack.
Marcin, you are in Taipei, and your organization is called the European Values Center for Security Policy. Just what is your reaction to Taiwanese volunteers in Ukraine? Tell us about the connection.
Absolutely. I do not think that the push to contribute to the defense of Ukraine among the Taiwanese population, even at the highest level of sacrifice, meaning volunteering to go to fight on the Ukrainian battleground, is surprising at all. And as we try to find an explanation for this great solidarity-based momentum, I think that we can circle back to what we talked about just a few minutes ago, mainly the trends in Taiwanese identity. So people of Taiwan are increasingly proud of their own identity and are increasingly willing to assert it, but also because the space to manifest a distinct Taiwanese identity is fairly new. It was hard-won over the decades of Taiwan's transition to democracy. It is not taken for granted. And I believe that the onset of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine has really cemented the fact in the Taiwanese psyche that neither democracy nor Taiwanese-ness can be taken for granted and have to be effectively defended in light of the of growing Chinese belligerence.
It's certainly a fascinating connection that we have seen. Marcin Jajewski, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.